But sex is about letting go. Good sex is about letting go and being completely uninhibited in the moment. So here's someone though who had
Wow, is that a highlight right there?
right. So this person grew up feeling like, oh my God, I can't, there's so much chaos around me. I need to control everything I can. I can't let go. Right. And so so then when it shows up in the sexual context, but it's not because there was anything sexual that happened to her.
That person would not even make that connection.
Never make the connection, right? And so that's part of making what's unknown known. That's part of that music, unconscious music that plays in the background that we don't even know is playing.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Really fun guest today. We have Wendi Dumbroff. She is an expert in individual family therapy. Let me make sure I get this: couples therapy and sex therapy in that order. Wow, we're going to have some interesting conversations. So we're going to try and touch on things that everybody can relate to. And our hope today is that something that we talk about just really sparks something that causes you to just maybe be introspective, think a little bit about it, and maybe have one of those light bulb moments where the show becomes helpful to you. The other thing I don't want to leave out, which is really important, she's a certified teacher of mindfulness and meditation. We're going to talk about that. And so, Wendi, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is going to be cool. This is going to be cool. Selfishly, because the topic is interesting to me. And so
Uh-huh.
I think it's just going to flow naturally. And I know you have a lot of cool, interesting things to share with us. So let's start out with, if you don't mind, can you just give us a little bit of a background on how you got into, I know you had a previous career as a
Mhm.
pharmacist, but tell me how you got into the therapy business and just kind of take me through that. And I'm going to say, I apologize in advance for the throat issue today. I may have to take a sip of this every so often.
Yeah.
Go
No, no
ahead.
problem. Yeah, so right, my last life I was a pharmacist. I had kids and I retired for a while. My main career as a mom, of course. And being a therapist was always an old interest of mine. I thought about it back in my 20s, after I graduated from college. And I decided finally in my early 40s, I took the plunge, went back, got my master's. I then did some postgraduate training at the Ackerman Institute in for family therapy, and that was in couple and family therapy at the Ackerman. And what I realized is that when you work with couples, one of the biggest issues is sexual issues. And for some reason, they don't teach couples and sex therapy together. So because I really love working with couples, I'm always doing continuing ed, but I decided to also do postgraduate study in sex therapy, and so I could just be, more conversant in all the areas that couples might bring to the table.
What, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but there's some sort of expression like um, sex is when sex isn't going good, it's 80% of your problem. When it's going great, it's only 20% or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I had heard that a long time ago too. I think that it's that the sex may not be the problem, but that doesn't mean that there's other problems. Because some
For
people
sure.
come to therapy and they're like, no, 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 the sex is fine. It's everything else. That's the only area. Sometimes maybe that's the only area where we do connect. That's the only way we can be close and connect without conflict or without something else. But oftentimes it's a mishmash of many things, including sex.
Because of the topics we're about to get into, I mean, some of the questions I have may even become personal. Like, so I'm about to ask you something
Yeah.
that I'm really curious about. And if it's too personal, just move right on. Okay.
Okay.
It's all good. But I want to dive a little deeper into the idea of you went to school and you became a therapist and you're practicing and you're successful. I've just found that people that I know who are therapists, even the one that I've gone to for years, tend to have had their own issues and then worked with therapists, and it led them to become good therapists because they themselves found it helpful in their own life. Was there some sort of like spark that got you into it?
Um, you know, I truly believe that there are not too many coincidences, right? I think that you do what you do for a reason. Um, yes, I think that I do what I do for a reason, and I'll share a little more about that. Um, and Also, having gone through when I was younger, gone through my own therapy, really just getting more in touch with things through things that happen in my life. You meet different people, things happen, you have experiences, and sometimes we need to go to therapy. But it's really it was a very positive thing for me because it really helped me open up as a person, and because I couldn't have done this work when I was younger because I hadn't done my own work. And
Oh, so that's powerful right there. That's very powerful.
right.
It
So
really
if
is.
I had gone in to be a therapist in my 20s, I don't think I would have been very good or very effective because I hadn't explored my own childhood, my own reasons, my own triggers, my own everything. I think I was pretty defended, um, just not letting things out. And through the process of going through my own therapy, through the process of bringing all of that I learned in school to myself, I think it made me a better mom. um,
I bet.
yeah, and also, yes, there are things from my childhood. I would say my biggest trigger is not feeling heard, right? And so, what do I do for a living now? I listen to people. I validate them, and for me, that's very reparative because if you don't feel heard, right? So here I am. Here's my journey, yes, as a therapist, and I can give that to others.
I've heard people say that as adults, we spend our entire adult life trying to get over our childhood.
Yeah. I'd put a strength-based lens on that. Like, not that we're just trying to get over, we're mucking through the everything around us. We are showing resilience, I think,
Oh, yeah, that's good.
because when we can do things different, that is reparative. If you are a child who doesn't feel heard, or you were a child who felt like they were dismissed or not made to feel unimportant, especially as a parent, when we can do things differently with our own children, nobody can change their past. Nobody can snap their fingers and have the magic parent they wish they had. But when we can do things differently, that's reparative. Um, and I think that there's a lot of ways in which things can be reparative. There's some theories that say, everything we do is really reparative of our childhood. And I think that is a very resilient uh, attribute, right? There's plenty of people repeat the same old things that, oh, yeah, this is how I felt as a kid, and here I am doing it again. When you can get in touch with that, place for mindfulness, right? When you can have that awareness. Mindfulness is about awareness, right? And to me, awareness is everything. The more we cultivate awareness, the more wisdom we have. Because when we can't change anything we're not aware of. There's a quote by Viktor Frankl that says between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And in that space is our power and our freedom. I'm not quoting it exactly correctly, but something like that. And I think of this as the space of mindfulness. This is the space where we have control over our emotions versus our emotions having control over us. It's the difference between being reactive and responsive, right?
Oh my God,
Responding versus reacting.
this is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's
And
brilliant. How
yeah,
you respond in a moment versus how you react
yes.
happens in that moment of pause,
Pause. Absolutely.
which is very difficult because when you're triggered, it's very difficult to pause.
Exactly. So when we
I spent
cultivate.
way too many years in therapy. Go ahead.
Well, no, but you're right. You're right. It's kind of like I always liken it, like food is one of my struggles in life. So I always liken it to like Sunday night when you're full and you just had lasagna and dessert, you can say, yeah, Monday morning I'm going on a diet, right? Because and you mean it. It's not that you don't mean it, but Monday morning comes and you're looking at a hard-boiled egg and a half a cup of berries. You're like, oh, it's a little bit harder to commit to that right now when there's
Sure.
bagels left over from, the weekend sitting on the counter, right? So yeah, in that moment when you're hungry, it's really hard to say, all right, I'm going to have
Sure.
something healthy and low calorie, and yeah.
Can I go back for a sec to this is everything you're saying is so interesting to me. I don't even want to stop you.
No, that's okay.
If we go back to triggers for a sec,
Mm,
you mentioned not feeling heard, but not but in addition to that, isn't it? And I'm asking you because I only know one or two, but isn't it true that there's some like a lot of people have the I'm not good enough belief that's beneath it, or a
yeah.
belief that's based in fear? I mean, aren't there just some core basic beliefs that are just kind of misprogrammed in us as kids?
Yes.
People carry around, "I'm not good enough," and my god, every little thing could trigger that, and it
Yeah.
could be different triggers for people. Like, if you don't identify what your triggers are, where the false beliefs are, your life could you're never gonna reach your potential, right?
Mm, yes. And to add to what you said, when people are more reactive, those beliefs, the narrative that a person has about who they are in the world, it's below the level of consciousness. So a guy in a bar
Wait,
may
say that
feel
again, say that again?
it's below the level of consciousness. I always say the unconscious, right, is like music playing in the background, except we don't know it's playing, but it informs everything we do, right? So there's this music playing and you're moving to that music, but you don't actually know. So, like the guy in the bar and somebody accidentally bumps into him and he hauls off and punches him, reactivity, right?
Right.
So then you get that guy is mandated to go to therapy, and you start exploring his childhood, and he's using the word I was disrespected, disrespected. I listen very closely to the words that people use because they are such a bright light into what it is for them. And so, hey, is that feeling of disrespect familiar to you? When else in your life have you felt disrespected? And he begins to talk about his childhood, right? So that same guy, right? So that feeling of being disrespected is playing in the background, and automatic goes to like, hey, dude, you don't do that to me. Boom, right? So if he had that space, a part of therapy is making what is unknown in our unconscious, helping to understand it and connect the past with the present and make more conscious. And so when you're aware of that, oh, so when you feel disrespected, you get really angry. And I always say anger is always, almost always, 90 odd percent of the time, the
Fear.
secondary
It's
emotion.
fear.
Fear, hurt, usually there's something much more vulnerable under anger.
So anger is the it's the,
Yeah.
protective mechanism.
Yes, the protective defense that, comes in so quickly to shield us that we don't even know there's something underneath it. But when you start
Wow.
to unpack that, right, you see much more vulnerable, softer pieces. I felt so hurt. I felt that feeling of disrespected made me feel like I didn't matter, just like I felt in my home growing up. Um, and and I just reacted, right? You have that space, like, and you're able to take that pause. I notice that I'm feeling really hurt right now, disrespected. You have the wisdom of choice, right? You have awareness, you have the wisdom of choice. None of us can help how we feel or even the thoughts that come to us. But with awareness, the only thing we can control is what we actually do,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because I think you're uncovering something really powerful here. Control is really an illusion
Yes.
because you really can't control
Right.
anything except what you're thinking, and if you can't control what you're thinking, I think it's probably a definite, real different problem if you
Mhm.
can't control your thoughts. So
Well,
you
no, I
can
would say
control your thoughts.
I I'm gonna interrupt you there just because I would say we can't always control our thoughts. A thought may come to you, right? Like, "Oh, I'm not good enough, right? That's that's not the problem. We can't help that that comes to us. But when we can have awareness, wait a minute,
Mm.
I'm going down that rabbit hole. I have a choice here. I don't have to let my mind go there. Or if it keeps going there, I'm going to keep bringing it back,
So you
right?
can control how you're responding or reacting to it and
Exactly.
what you're doing with it in that moment,
Exactly.
which is an awareness.
Mhm.
It always a lot of it goes back to that. But I mean, you're uncovering something. That's like a really, really key piece. What is one of the most common reasons that people come to you, and maybe you get into it's individual, it's couples, it's sex, it all ends up being, but do they initially come to you and you find that the root cause of most of the issues is that lack of pause, that lack of hearing each other? Like, what is it?
With couples,
Yeah, the most common reason they actually come to you. I don't mean the symptoms. I mean the
mhm.
underlying root cause that you find, oh, if we can just resolve this, everything else might fall into place.
Yeah, so it's I can't say there's any one answer to that. I'll give you a
Yeah,
bit.
there's not, but maybe some common things that
Right, but there's
relate
al
to.
there's the presenting problem. There's been an affair, some sort of betrayal, we don't communicate, we're always fighting. He, she, they never hear me, or we don't have enough sex, or I want more sex than my partner wants, or,
I'm gonna guess you hear that mostly from men, just for the record.
not
Oh,
always. No. Uh,
sorry, go ahead.
being very heterosexist, right? I would say maybe it's but a larger percentage of women than you would imagine. I would say it's maybe 60-40.
60% of the women say they don't have enough sex?
I would say more men, 60.
Oh, 60 to 40 that way.
It's not
It's
always the
still
man.
surprising to me.
It's not always the man that is wanting more sex. A lot of times it's the woman. The reasons may be different underneath.
And does the woman want sex with the husband, or does she just want sex in general with somebody else? I'm just joking.
Both.
I'm just joking.
Both. I've had experience with both. Uh,
Let me just bring you back, though, to what I asked you, 'cause I took you off track, but
no, no,
there are some probably some common
yes,
denominators that maybe people be like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds like me."
yeah.
What do you think some of those might be?
So when I work with couples, what I want to understand, I work circularly, right? I want to understand what happens between two people. And not like it's not a linear process. If only he, she, they didn't do this, then we'd be fine. It's when this happened, when I get triggered, I do this. I yell and scream. When I yell and scream, I'm going to be very heterosexist here. You. When I, the woman, yell and scream, he, my husband, shuts down. The more he shuts down, the more I yell and scream, right? That's the like a classic pursuer distancer model, right? But what happens? What triggers this woman to yell and scream, right? What triggers this man to shut down? That is all it, those triggers are often buried in the families of origin, right? And so we do an exploration of families of origin, as are the coping strategies. In one case, the coping strategy is to pursue, angry pursuit. In the other case, the coping strategy is to shut down, avoid, not deal with it, right? What happened in their childhoods, right? What was their childhood like? What was their relationship with parents? What are the messages they got, spoken, unspoken? Because a lot of times the messages that I'm not good enough are unspoken messages. It's just being ignored, never being there for a person. I don't matter. I don't matter. Sometimes another sibling matters. Sometimes mom and dad are so worried. I can't say anything because mom and dad are worried and fighting. I don't want to do anything else to upset them. So somebody learns to maybe keep it in. And so what does they do? They just shut down, right? So one of the things that I try to help couples with is to recognize their pattern. I use a model called the vulnerability cycle, which was developed by Michelle Shankman and Mona Fishbane over 2 decades ago. And really it shows in a very circular form what happens. and we understand what is the yearning, as Michelle always says, Michelle Shankman says, what is the yearning underneath those vulnerabilities? What is this person wanting? And oftentimes it is to know I'm okay, I'm heard, I matter, I'm good enough. Um, and that these survival strategies that people develop in our childhood, most of us, those buttons get installed early, and they were useful then. They kept us alive then. It's how we survived when
Oh,
somebody
that's
didn't.
interesting.
Yeah, but they may not be useful. Context has changed, and they're not necessarily useful in our adult relationships. So what I try and do is really illustrate the pattern that a couple is in. No matter how bad it looks tilted to one side. Oh, he had an affair for the last 3 years and he was off, taking this woman places and spending our money, and I didn't know. Okay. Were those good choices? No, they were not. Can it end a marriage? Sometimes it can. More often than not, interestingly, when there's been an affair, couples do stay together. Um, and there's still a circular pattern. Perhaps this is a man who shuts down, who never felt important, and in the daily day-to-day life, the pattern is such that he feels taken for granted or something. So he finds a place where he doesn't feel taken for granted, right? Where somebody is valuing him. Is it a good decision? No, it's not a good decision. It's if I could tell people one thing, if you're thinking of having an affair or going outside the boundaries of a monogamous relationship or outside the boundaries of an open relationship, before you break the boundaries, talk to your partner. It's worth it because trust is a hard thing to rebuild. And so I really look at what happens between people and, of course, what's underneath it, what they do, and helping them to shift that. When you see what's happening between you, you can actually see, oh, there's the problem. We need to change this dance that we're in.
I like that. So that the vulnerability cycle and the circular patterns. So, and you have when you look at it, you're able to see things that they can't see, obviously, because you're looking at it as an outsider, and you pick up on the things that they're not even thinking about. And
Mhm,
I guess sometimes it could be like you just said. Oh, it's just that right there,
mhm,
and you make some changes.
yeah.
Um, I had something I wanted to ask you. Let me just double check. Hang on.
And that, by the way, is another space for mindfulness, right? Because it's so automatic that we go from being triggered into our survival strategy. That's a
Automatic. I can
Yeah,
relate. It's automatic.
yeah. So that is a space where if the person who shuts down can stay a little more present, the person who angrily pursues because maybe she's triggered when her partner, shuts down, can calm that pursuit. If you change the steps, you change the dance. And mindfulness is definitely something that you can use to pause, to turn in, and to do something different.
It's so interesting because um, I had gone through some things a couple years ago where it turned out that I was already meditating every morning and using mindfulness, and it really had changed a lot of things in my life.
Mhm.
But when I was going through some personal things, that was the space, that was the thing that made the biggest difference for me.
Uh-huh.
Being able to, and I would do guided meditations. So if I was looking to sort of have a certain feeling or remain in a place of love or like putting certain things in my mind, one of the guided meditations, I might find this interesting that I did, would lead me to remember a person in my life who I felt the most connected to, which for me was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and
Mhm.
then to actually feel the feeling,
Mhm.
like as
Mm.
if that person was still there, and then in that state to then go on with the other guided parts of the meditation to get my mind where it needed to be, and that would stay with me all day, and I
Yep.
would actually feel love for the world for the whole day. It sounds kind of corny, but
No, it
it really
doesn't.
does.
Actually, I
It's
kind of
real.
learned from that story. I
It's
really
real.
do. That's so beautiful because I can because that is putting it's bringing such compassion to you, right? Putting you in that place of being loved. in front of
Right.
eyes and where you can do no wrong,
And
right?
that's what it was. So then over the past year, I don't even know why, I stopped getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning because I would do this, but when everybody was sleeping in the
Mhm,
total peace of the morning. And I just stopped and it's it was I just started doing it again about a week ago, getting
mm,
up at 5:15. But
yeah,
but little by little by little,
yeah,
over the past year, a lot of those things that became more so the norm for me, pausing more, being
mhm,
more mindful, they started to slowly kinda go back. And it
uh,
reminded me, like, you can't really stop.
yeah,
It's just gotta be a way of life with
yeah,
for I hear people say that you can't meditate. I found my own way to do it, and I used to be able to sit there for a half hour in total silence. Every so often, a thought would creep in, but you learn how to really be with yourself, and
yeah,
those days, the
mhm,
best days I've ever had,
mm,
every day that I did that. So
mm,
it is a very real, powerful thing, and it did have a lot to do with what I was dealing with in my relationship a couple of years ago.
mhm,
So I went back to doing it about a week ago, and it's a little bit to get back into the rhythm, but for anybody
yeah,
who's never tried it, try it.
yeah,
Don't say you can't do it because anybody can do it. In fact, that's the real key is learning how to do it. That journey, that's the point.
yeah,
That's the point.
yeah. It's called a practice for a reason, right?
Right.
Because there's no expert. And and, I was talking actually this morning with a client. I did a short guided meditation with a client in a session. There's no there's no wrong way. She said to me, I was spending very little time in the actual moment of awareness. I said, "That's okay. As long as when you notice, oh, not with the breathing." We did a short breathing-based meditation.
Yeah.
As long as you notice not with the breathing, you can then come back.
Right.
And that moment of coming back is just as important as the moments that you are in intentional awareness.
Mhm.
It's a moment of waking up. Mindfulness is a waking up. And yes, it is always good to continue to cultivate that. And I do believe also that it's kind of like the toothpaste is out of the tube. Like
Right.
once you've woken up, I don't think you really go back. You may slip a little here and there, but you notice that you slipped. And you may say,
Right.
"Oh, I'm better at catching and taking that pause when I'm practicing it more." But
That's
I
right.
noticed that I didn't take that pause because you still have that awareness that you have grown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure I wrote this down a certain way, so I asked it the right way. So, okay. I'm really curious about this, right? And I'm sure a lot of people are curious about this. What happened? How do you handle what do you do when 2 people have different desires? We're switching gears in the
Yeah.
bedroom. 2 people want 2 different things.
Uh-huh.
I know it's broad, but they're not in sync and they just really want 2 different things in the bedroom. Like, how do you handle that?
So, like, for example, if one person wants kinky sex and the other person doesn't,
Sure.
yeah, okay. Like different are you talking about different
Anything. It's just that
levels
they're
of
not in sync.
desire or different sexual styles?
It could be somebody's one person's boring and one person's exciting. One person wants to lay there, one person wants to have a bunch of fun. It's
Uh,
just that you're just not in sync. You're just not
yeah,
and it causes like, "Oh, wait, this
yeah,
doesn't feel right because 'cause we're just not in the same mindset of, like,
yeah.
what it means versus it being just natural and maybe even so being able to just be open and say, "Hey, you know what? I want this or I want that." You're just not in sync in the bedroom. I know it's broad, but how
Right.
do you start that conversation? Like, what do you do?
So, well, they're coming to a sex therapist. They're coming to a couple and sex therapists. So we have very open discussions, right? And I think people, it's been my experience that people, if we're comfortable talking about even the littlest details, so tell me how you masturbate. What's your style? What do you do? Like what makes that so good? Oh, so how do you achieve an orgasm when you're masturbating? But and can you help your partner to know exactly what you do, right? So we have those very open discussions in the therapy, and the process that my process is I do a sexual history with each partner, and I do them separately so that people feel more like they can be honest and open
That's
with everything.
great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and uh, I present to my clients before we begin, as long as they both agree to it, that whatever happens in a private session is private to the extent that the client tells me it's private.
In the
So
one-on-one, you mean?
in the one-on-one,
Right,
and as long as they both agree to that, because I want to be able to know everything, but
right,
then they also know that I might hold a secret, and
right.
that's open an open secret kind of policy, right?
Well, the
So
trust side of that is important. Like, there's so many things that you have to remember that you can't say in the couple session because the one person didn't want you to say it, right?
right. I haven't messed up yet, so I think I'm okay.
"Oops, I wasn't supposed to say that."
So, yeah. No, no, that would not be good. So I'm very careful. Usually people say, I said, I'll say something like, is there anything you've shared today that you wouldn't want to bring back to the couple session? So we really, we pare it down in that way. Or when we're talking, somebody will say, I don't want my partner to know this, so I just make a note and star that and uh remind myself. I don't forget those things. And so the process of that is it's the whole historical exploration. It's learning, how did this person become the sexual being that they are? It's a relational history, because there's so many different things, right? There are things that happen to us that could be completely non-sexual, but it shows up in a sexual space. So for example, so somebody who grew up in a very chaotic, I probably use this example a lot, but someone who grew up in a very chaotic environment in their home, right? They're maybe they had a alcoholic parent or just yelling, screaming, whatever. It was a chaotic environment. And now the woman doesn't, well, again, I'm being heterosexist here. She doesn't really want sex, right? She's not that into sex. Or she can't have an orgasm with her partner, but she can have an orgasm when she's masturbating alone, right? So nothing sexual happened to her. She wasn't abused sexually. But sex is about letting go. Good sex is about letting go and being completely uninhibited in the moment. So here's someone though who had,
Wow, is that a highlight right there?
right. So this person grew up feeling like, oh my God, I can't, there's so much chaos around me. I need to control everything I can. I can't let go. Right? And so so then when it shows up in the sexual context, but it's not because there was anything sexual that happened to her.
That person would not even make that connection.
Never make the connection, right? And so that's part of making what's unknown known. That's part of that music, unconscious music that plays in the background that we don't even know is playing, right? And
Have you
so
ever heard of Joe Dispenza?
who?
Is the doctor Joe Dispenza?
No, I've not.
After the show, I'll send you. He says that a lot. He talks about making the unknown known, and that's why when you say it, it keeps reminding. Because I've watched him for years,
Yeah.
and I love that you're saying a lot of the things you're saying because I believe a lot in what he says,
Yeah.
and there's consistency. So it's the
Yeah.
second person I'm hearing saying the
Well,
same thing.
Freud had the model of the iceberg, right? And he looked at this like the tip of the iceberg is what sticks out of the ocean,
Right,
but the iceberg is
like
huge.
90% you can't see.
You can't see. And he used that model as the model of that's what's unconscious. And even Freud is the one who brought us the unconscious to the modern world. And so just that idea that most of it is buried underneath, we're not aware. Yeah.
So the first thing you do, the approach is to get the couple separate, and have those separate conversations with them,
With
so you
sex
can
ed.
really learn like what's happening with each of them, so that you can help them put the pieces together, so that they are more. You didn't use the word vulnerable. Oh, what was the
connect
word?
connect the past to the present, and sometimes it's sort of like being a private eye. We're in there looking for why is this happening. I always say that people have good reasons for doing the things they do, even if it looks like something so egregious on its front, right? People have good reasons for doing the things they do. It doesn't mean it's useful to do it in their adult life, but usually you can find that connection and understand it, And I mean, I think that's helpful in helping people to shift.
That might be the answer to my next question. And this is special because even if somebody never has the opportunity to meet you and work with you in person, if you could say there's one thing that a couple could do to have things be better in the bedroom,
Mhm.
if they didn't see somebody who was a conduit to help them, what's one thing they could do? I'm putting you on the spot. What's one thing that they could do
Yeah.
to have things be different so they both feel heard in the bedroom?
Well, opening up dialogue, acknowledging discomfort around the dialogue, right? I think when we turn mindfulness again is about turning toward what's uncomfortable versus turning away. So when you can just name it, "Hey, I love you, but I really wanna have a talk about our sex life. What do you think? It's really feels really uncomfortable for me, but can we do it? Can we do it? If we need to do it in little bits, we can do it in little bits. I wanna know what you like. I want you to know what I like." To be curious about each other.
Oh, be curious. That's great.
Be curious
So
and be
be
open
curious and be vulnerable enough to
and be
actually
and
have
be
that
vulnerable.
conversation, even
Yes.
if maybe it's embarrassing or
Yeah. Like, name it all, right? It's like, "Okay, I feel really embarrassed, but I wanna talk about something." Or, "I know this has never been easy for us to talk about." And, I mean, again, it makes sense. Like, most people many people, I wouldn't say all, not all, of course. Many people, when I say to them, "So how was sex talked about in your family? How was it handled in your family?" And
it
I
wasn't.
get a lot of, "Yeah, oh, it wasn't,"
Right. Right. I mean,
Uh,
think about this. How many people can relate? If I don't know even what the answer would even be. How many people can relate to, you said before, husband wants more sex, wife doesn't want, or vice versa,
mhm.
and they just keep it inside. They don't talk about it. They don't feel vulnerable, comfortable, and it builds up, and then it comes out in other ways in the relationship.
Of course. Oh, it definitely can come out in other ways in the
How
relationship.
could that? How could it come out in other ways?
Oh, my goodness. One gentleman said to me recently, it's like, if we're having sex, then I'm just, like, happier all around, so I'm a better husband, right? If we're not having sex, then I'm, like, grumpy and mad. That 'cause he feels probably he feels unloved or uncared for, right?
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you can't say that to your spouse, if you can't share that openly, where the spouse is willing to hear that without feeling blamed,
Mhm,
it's like
mhm.
it's an impasse. Like,
Right. That can be an impasse, right. And there can be so many other, so the guy maybe had an affair. I'm not talking I always use an
yeah, how about
amalgam.
this time the one with the wife has the affair? Let's flip it around.
Okay, so the wife has the affair, and then the guy's like, you're right, I do have to say not always, but a bigger percentage of the time, it is the man who has the affair. Not always, but it has, in my experience, has been. But yeah, so he wants sex, and she's not really willing to move in that close because she feels this whole betrayal, right? Or vice versa. So there can be other, you have to always look at the whole context. The one other thing that I would offer, and this comes out of a lot of sex research from Canada, is the concept of willingness. You don't have to have desire to have sex. You you can be willing, and often responsive desire will follow. It's like, "Oh yeah, that's why I always like doing this. That's why I used to do this a lot because it feels good." Right? And so the concept of willingness can be really very opening of opportunity to have sex. And I would also add that sex does not these are models by uh there's a study by Lulan, and I'm not remembering all the other names, I apologize, from sex researchers in Canada, that sex can does not have to start with desire, it can start with willingness, and it does not have to end in orgasm. It can end in feelings of connection, feelings of emotional closeness, feeling just saying ending in, "This was pleasurable, and we're done now." Um, and for couples, especially as they age, to begin to expand the definition of sex, even younger couples, right? What sex is as you define it. One of my mentors in the sex therapy field, her name is Suzanne Iasenza, she defines sex as anything you wouldn't do with your neighbor. And I love that. I really love that. Because what is sex? Maybe an 85-year-old couple or a 90-year-old couple is going to be different, perhaps, than it is for a 20-year-old couple.
It's so bizarre. Sometimes I just turned 50 and nothing's changed for me yet, but I think to myself, like, gee, I wonder what it's like when you're like 70 or 80. Like, and if as a male, I do have friends who I know who are that age where they still have desire and the wife, it's just gone.
Yeah,
And I've never probed him to say, well, what do you do? But like, it occurs to me as I'm getting older, like, geez, that's a whole new stage of life that could present all new problems.
yeah, yeah. Willingness. That's where willingness comes in.
I've
There,
never heard that. And
yeah,
just so I understand what you're saying, no, I don't even want to go there. Bring that back to the beginning, which was even in that moment to decide you don't need desire, but you could have willingness. That goes back to having the pause and being aware in the moment of what you're bringing to the table.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
even though you may not um, have a desire at that moment,
Hmm.
we'll use the same model where the husband is saying no. I'm sorry, the wife is saying no. The husband is saying yes.
Hmm.
And there's, oh, I have a headache. I have to wash my hair. All the reasons that a woman might come up with. That
Hmm.
sounds ridiculous, but um, that moment they could be like, well, I'm going to be willing because I'm in this relationship and there's a need that he has that needs to be fulfilled. So if I don't do it, what's he supposed to do?
Hmm.
And if that becomes a pattern long enough, it could lead to what you're saying,
Hmm.
where people start to go, well, I got to do something.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
well, willingness is it might be the most powerful word you said this entire
Wow.
conversation.
Yeah,
I've never heard anybody say that.
yeah. And sometimes people will say to me, "But I don't want him just to be willing, or I don't want him just to be willing. I want him to like lust after me." And I
Why do
I
you need that?
yeah, well, I do believe that if your partner doesn't want to do something, but they care enough about you to say, "Hey, this is important to you. I'm willing." I think that says quite a lot about how much they care and respect you and want you to be happy.
I want to read something to you. It's a statistic that I pulled up. I was curious, and I was curious what your thought on it was. So I'm curious how you react to this. So we pulled up some studies about how often married couples have sex,
Mhm,
and here's what it came up. 25, and this is a repeat. I forget what the source was, but I made sure it was real. It wasn't some nonsense.
mhm,
25% say once a week. 16% say 2 to 3 times a week. 5% say 4 or more times a week. Yes.
mhm,
17% say once a month.
mhm,
Hope these percentages add up. 19% said 2 to 3 times a month.
mhm,
So remember, 16% said 2 to 3 times a week. 19% said 2 to 3 times a month.
mhm,
10% said have not had sex in the past year, which
mhm,
I found shocking.
mhm.
And then 7% said 1 to 2 times a year. So if we break it over weeks, if you figure 25, 35, it's 41. So basically half of them are saying in the course of a month, they have it somewhere between once a week or 4 times a week. So it's like half. The other half goes into months and then years.
Mhm,
There's like
mhm.
a real, so do you find that, does that sound right to you? Based on what you see in your practice?
I am a strong believer in there is no one truth, and whether it is how couples interact, whether it is the boundaries that people set up, whether and also how are they defining sex? If we use my mentor Suzanne Iasenza's definition of sex, it, what do they mean? Are they saying, are we talking just about penetration? Are we talking about cuddling on the sofa together? I mean, I'm not going to cuddle on the sofa
Oh,
with
that's
my
interesting.
neighbor, so are we talking about putting naked bodies together and being close and connected? Are they only talking about penetration, right? So penetrative sex. So
That's a good
how would
point.
that translate to gay and lesbian couples, right? So I don't think that I don't think there's any one truth. Um, and I don't want anyone out there to think that something is normal that makes them abnormal, because now
That's great.
maybe some people are having sex 2 or 3 times a week, and somebody wants it every day, right? I, and as long as both people are on board to say, okay, I'll do it every day, then having sex every day is normal and fine and good for them. The people who do it once a month or once a year, that that may be fine for them. As long if it The problem happens when one person is dissatisfied with the amount of sex that they are having. And so when there's a discrepant desire, I want to be
Yeah.
having it every day and you want to be having it once a year, right? Is That's when there's a problem. So I only want normal to I don't like the word normal, right? I
It's
think
a calibration of what's right where both people feel that it's good, it's right, it's for
yeah,
them.
exactly. Yeah.
I have one more question,
Okay.
and there is no right or wrong answer. This is just like I'm looking for. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
W- w- To the degree you could actually say it, what's like the most shocking thing you've heard? Somebody come in and said, "Ah," and you're like, "Oh my god, really?"
Uh, I don't think that I don't think I've been
Doesn't
shocked.
have to be about sex. I mean, it's anything that's come into your practice.
Yeah, I don't wanna I don't wanna say I don't wanna give away anything, right? That anybody would notice themselves in my description, but, um, I can't say that I've been shocked, but what I will say is, I guess I'm not really gonna answer your question
Is
to
there
your 2nd
something you could if I heard it, that I'd be like, "Wow, I can't believe that goes on out there." Maybe that's so I'm not even in the context of your practice. You're a therapist, and you've heard a lot of things, even in conversations with friends. And if you were to tell me in passing, "Wow, you're not gonna believe this one."
Yeah, there are a lot of things that would cross my boundaries. Um, I'm in a monogamous marriage. I would not be in an open marriage. That's not my style. I don't judge it. I think that, again, there's no one truth. That works for other people, right? So having, you know, knowing that people may be out there and they have several partners, and they're going to be sometimes even have a community of that. Like there can be like a poly cule, like this community of people with whom they are poly, and it's almost like a family.
I
uh
got one for you that's about that.
yeah.
I'll say something. You just made me think of something. So this I couldn't believe this when I heard this, and it turns out it happened. So where I was living in New Jersey, and then
Mhm.
I found out where I live here in Florida, the same thing goes on. I mean, I know what goes on, but the way that it goes on. So in New Jersey, the town I lived in, there was there was a group of people in a certain part of the community
Mhm.
that if they were going to have like all the couples would get together, what do you call that, swinging, right?
Mhm.
They would, if you were a couple that swung or swings,
Mhm.
you would have a pineapple somewhere
Uh-huh.
on your no, that's the Florida one. You'd have a rock painted white. So
Uh,
and so then when I heard this, I drove around this particular section of the town. I'm like, oh my god, some people in front of their yards had a rock painted white, and I was like, this is no joke. Then
Interesting.
when I moved to Florida, it's more common down here, even in the community I live in. People have some sort of pineapple. It could
Uh,
be a door knocker, it could be on their mailbox, but there is some kind of pineapple, and
oh,
it signifies that they're swingers.
interesting.
I was shocked when I first heard that. I'm like, come on, this can't be
Yeah.
real, but
I didn't
true.
know that. I mean, I live in New Jersey. I didn't I didn't know that.
I'll tell you when we hang up. I'll tell you what section of the town it is. You can
Uh-huh.
go drive around, and you'll be like, oh my god, this is true. It's a half hour from where you live.
Uh-huh. What happens if they sell their house and the next people that move
You
in
better
don't
change out. Next thing you know, somebody's knocking on our door, a couple of
Yeah.
couples like, "Hey, we're here. Let's exchange keys."
Oh, that's
They would
interesting.
have I know we never partook in it, obviously. We didn't even know anybody who ever admitted to it, but what we would hear would be that they would get together, and then they would pull their keys in a bowl, and they would
Yes,
mix the keys up, and then they would go their separate ways with whoever had the keys to whoever's house.
yes, that's
That
I did
shocked me. It
hear that
really
as
did.
well. Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, I answered my own question, and I got you shocked.
I don't know about shocked, but
Um, I'm gonna bring it to a conclusion here. So, first of all, this was really interesting. We got a lot in 45 minutes, and
yes.
I was captivated the whole time. I was
Oh,
like, this was so interesting to me,
yeah.
and it was because everything you said has application to anybody that listens to this.
Yeah.
Any one little part, and that was what we were hoping, or I was
Mm,
hoping would happen.
oh, good,
Um,
glad.
it's kind of we talked about so many things that so many people can relate to, but the funny thing is we only scratched the surface. There's an endless amount of things that
Mhm,
people could think about that might inspire them to speak to somebody like you. Just maybe just to tweak things in their relationship. Maybe if they're in a critical spot and they need a really serious help, or they just need a tune up. But if you don't believe in therapy, if somebody out there doesn't, maybe this changed your point of view, and that would be
mhm,
good too,
mm, yeah, yeah. Also, in therapy, I think sometimes people are afraid, "Oh, no, I'm gonna have to, like, bare my soul," and, it's up to you. It's up to you what you share and
for
what you don't share, and, I would never twist anybody's arm to tell me something that they didn't feel ready to share or didn't want to share. Yeah. Respecting people's boundaries is important.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and having this conversation. It
Well,
was a lot of
thank you
fun.
so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. It really has.
I appreciate that. Is there any information you want to share as far as how people can reach you if they have a question?
Oh, that you can find me on my website. It's wendydumbroff.therapy.com. It's Wendy with an I. Most people spell it with a Y at the end. So, and I have, you can shoot me an email from there or text me to the number. Text is always a better way for me to make sure I respond versus even a phone call or a email.
And that's on your website.
It's all on my website.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when if you look down below, there's a description and you'll see all of this down below. Your website will be there. We'll probably pull out the numbers so you can list it there for people in case they don't want to click on the link.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully, this wasn't about getting you business, but you know what?
No,
It's
no.
really your business is actually solely about helping people. So I do hope that some people find you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's really been lovely
This was
speaking.
awesome. This was
Yeah.
awesome. I may have to check in with you every so often and do like periodic, just what's happening out there, just to kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
update people, because you see so many interesting things. You probably could share stories in your own way that
Mhm.
are that people can relate to and maybe just inspire some thought.
Yes. Yeah. Well, happy to come back if you would
Awesome.
ever like to do that. Yeah.
Let's end it there. And again, thank you. And we look forward to hopefully having you on the show again.
Thank you.
And if we can ever do anything for you, just let me know.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you
All
so much.
right. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.